journey, growing freely, no ceiling, no roof. Going deep with no stones to entangle my roots like they do.
Waking up tired and waiting for the horizon to appear. Remind me this work is all for love again. Looking ahead, I see hope in the sky. Give me access and I won't be denied. I won't let go, just hold tight to my head. The world that we knew would return here. Living my dream without noise.
You're the wipe away all tears.
I hate that my hands can't touch you. My arms and soul hold you, the memories and dreams. Know in my heart that I won't let go. Little things every day, hard to be unafraid. Everything is not the same no more. Policies stay the same. They should be ashamed. They should try to hide their face. There is a light that I'm chasing in life. It won't be put out. Thankful I'm alive. Ready or not, I will rise to a brighter day. A world without wars that divide. Grateful for all of them.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas is created and produced on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac, in the land we all call home, Connecticut. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native people whose land you are on and the history of the place you are in.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas stands in solidarity with Black and Brown communities and other groups who are targeted and abused by unjust systems of oppression. We support all movements working to decenter white voices and dismantle white supremacy. We are actively seeking to dismantle systemic racism, and we raise our voices with those in our community who are already engaged in this vital work. We commit to working alongside you to create transformative change in New Haven and in our global community.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Adriane Jefferson. I'm the Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of New Haven, and I am so happy to be here with you today. I can't tell you enough about how excited I am about this particular conversation. I first just want to take the time to thank the International Festival of Arts and Ideas for having me and putting this panel together for us to be in conversation and community today. So we are going to be talking with some amazing panelists. You are definitely in for a treat. And we're going to be discussing about how artists shape the future and how artists are advocating for equity and liberation and really just being the pillar for change in our community. I think many of us know that artists play an instrumental role in moving forward progress into our communities and into our world and shaping society and really being influencers and being a model for what we can follow when it comes to impact and creating change. And so that's what the conversation is going to be about today. I first wanted to start off with some quotes that are really near and dear to my heart. And I think that it really helps to shape this conversation around artistry and liberation. So the first quote is, "Progressive art can assist people to learn not only about the objective forces at work in the society in which they live, but also about the intensely social character of their interior lives. Ultimately, it can propel people towards social emancipation." Angela Davis. The other quote that I have that I just absolutely love, this quote is more about liberation in whole. It says, "We are beginning to understand that the world is always being made fresh and never finished, that activism can be the journey rather than the arrival, that struggle doesn't always have to be confrontational, but can take the form of reaching out to find common ground with the many others in our society who are also seeking ways out of alienation, isolation, and dehumanization by corporate globalization." And that's Grace Lee Boggs, the just amazing activist from out of Detroit. God rest her soul. And I actually recommend y'all get her book, The Next American Revolution, Sustainable Activism for the 21st Century. With that said, I have the honor of introducing our amazing panelists. First, want to bring to the stage Madeline Sayet. She is a citizen of the Mohegan tribe, the executive director of the Yale Indigenous Performing Arts Program, and co-artistic director of Red Eagle Soaring Native Youth Theater. For her work as a theater maker, she has been honored as Forbes 30 Under 40 in Hollywood and Entertainment, TED Fellow, and a recipient of the White House Champion of Change Award from President Obama. Her solo performance piece, Where We Belong, produced by Woolly Mammoth Theater Company in association with the Folger Shakespeare Library, is a featured event in this year's International Festival of Arts and Ideas. Hey, Madeline, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's so good to see you. How are you feeling? How's your soul today?
It's good. It's good. I'm excited to be here with all of these amazing panelists and to hear everyone's stories and their thoughts on some of these ideas.
I'm excited too. It's definitely good energy. I wanted to just first start off. I always think it's good for the people watching and viewing to really get to know you as a person. And so I wanted to start with the fun question. When you were a child, what was your biggest dream?
When I was a child, I was really interested in the idea of going on adventures. And so I think part of the reason I ended up in the arts was because I was one of those kids who just really wanted to like escape my reality and go somewhere else. It wasn't until much later in like my art trajectory that I realized we could actually use art to transform the world around us instead of having to go somewhere else. And so as a kid, I think probably as a little kid, my biggest dream was actually to be a painter, because I felt like at that time, those were the spaces in which I could really see like exponential transformation happening, even though I'm not an artist, a visual artist now. So that was probably my biggest dream as a kid, was probably to be a painter. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think it's amazing, children's ability to imagine and to dream big and to see art as a way that really can like shape our world. You can see it as a little kid. And I don't think that you're too far off from like what you've accomplished. You definitely stayed in the artistic realm. So like we are so thankful for you and your energy and for being here today. I want to go ahead and move forward and introduce our next panelist, Salwa. Salwa is a singer, songwriter, actress, poet, is a Connecticut-born, singer, songwriter, actress, poet who's sung background for Childish Gambino during his historic hosting and performance on Saturday Night Live to debut This Is America and Saturday Night Singles. They are an up-and-coming artist with soul and consciousness that uses their voice and flowetry to both uplift spirits and voices. When Salwa is not spitting bars or taking on the stage, that they dedicate their time to arts, inclusion, and equity and equality. Salwa is a founder of Black Haven, who curated the first of its kind Black Short Film Festival in New Haven, a member of the Cultural Equity Plan Committee in the city of New Haven, and involved in many various works alike. They hope that being a part of these transformative spaces, that they will be able to combine artistry and activism in order to inspire young people to enact change in their community. Welcome, Salwa.
What's goody? Hi.
I love you so much. It's just so good to I actually just love this panel today. So I can't wait to get everybody on the stage. I feel like so many people know you and have seen you. But what do you feel like is something you want to tell people about yourself that people wouldn't know by looking at you?
Whoa, that is a good question. Well, I feel like people might not tell. So I don't know why this is the first thing I thought of, but growing up, I did not take ballet classes. My mom had a all-women's studio, fitness studio. And so when I was younger, I took belly dancing classes. That was my ballet classes. So yeah, that was culturally a thing. So yeah, that's
do you still have some belly dancing skills?
I surely do. They're in my back pocket.
That's so awesome. Okay, well, maybe later on you can give us a little preview. No. All right, let's bring on our next panelist, Michael Mwenso. We are so thankful that Michael is with us today, a musician, curator, leader of Mwenso and the Shakes. He is a musical mollypath who spent his teens as James Brown's understudy. In 2007, he organized a late-night jam session at the famed London Jazz Club, Ronnie Scott's, which led to Wynton Marsalis handpicking him to be musician and curator at Jazz at Lincoln Center. Entrenched in the company of a few dozen talented Harlem-based musicians, Mwenso soon found the musicians that became the Shakes. Mwenso and the Shakes specialize in musical code switching, freely adopting and repurposing the drama, whimsy, and the spirit of the great American songbook, African beats, funk, modern jazz, dance pop, Delta blues, and cabaret theater. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. I got a little lost in the internet technology there. The laptop kind of broke down, but then I'm on the phone now. Well, it didn't literally break down, but it just wasn't happening for some reason.
I was gonna say your box looks a little smaller than when you were
I know. It's just not. It's the Chrome and the StreamYard. Sometimes it gets funky. But we're here now.
You're here, and I think that is a superpower to be able to just bounce back into it.
We have to be fluid.
Listen, and with that said, I want to ask you, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
To have maybe had the power to go back in time and to really assess what really was happening back then, but not that I don't want to be in this time. I want to be in this time, but I want to have the power to be like, what was really happening then, so that I can come back in this time and be like, all right, y'all. This is really what's going down. The books are wrong. So as artists, we do have that superpower. So I'm really kind of like, if I'm really being spiritual, that is our superpower. But I would like to mix in that spirituality with the realism of I want to go back to 1945 and see how the Black people are living. I want to go back before colonization in Africa. All of that.
Listen, we're going to get into it. And that's a good one. And we're definitely going to get into it. So hold on to that thought.
Okay.
I want to bring our final panelist to the stage. Definitely last but not least, Robert Gould. Robert is a creative entrepreneur, artist, author, and motivational speaker. He has made featured appearances on MTV, BET, and country music television. As CEO of RG Media Affiliates, Robert's unique passion is bridging the gap between music, media, education, and technology integration. He has been recognized by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his advocacy on health and wellness within the arts. Most recently, Black Enterprise Magazine honored Robert as a leading male entrepreneur in the nation. 2019 Be Modern Man. He has served as a youth spokesperson in the United States Senate and has held strategic operating positions with the Recording Academy, the Complex Music Group, Broadcast Music, Inc. Robert is an alumni of the prestigious Berklee College of Music, where he holds a bachelor's in music business and marketing with a minor in global studies. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. What's going on, family? What's up?
So, I've been asking everybody some, ice-breaking questions. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Madeline.
Okay.
When you were a child, what was your biggest dream?
You know what? This may sound a little jaded, but it is true for most creatives. I think when you get the bite and you get the bug, you just got the bite and the bug, baby.
Yes.
So I've never wanted to be anything else. I think I came out the womb, singing and dancing and building stages. My first idea and conception of even connecting people were taking our living room fireplace and making it a stage. And I was Oprah or Ryan Seacrest or whoever could be that at the moment. So I only know one thing, and that's always to say, Mom, I'm going to be a star. Dad, I'm going to be a star. And so for me personally, that's all I've ever known.
That is really interesting. I mean, real quick, before I jump into the questions I actually have for y'all, I'm just curious. So like Madeline, you've kind of said, you've been in the arts since you were a child. You knew that your place was in the arts, which is similar to what Robert is saying. So I'm curious, Michael and Salwa, did you also have that same affirmation as a child?
So
Yeah, I'll go. Interestingly enough, so it was both. So I always sang. I started off in poetry. So like singing for me, I've always sang. My mom always tells the story. Oh, she was singing when she was breastfeeding. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. She was like, I tell that story all the time. I used to hum, sing at my top of my lungs at 2 a.m. And so it was always something for me. And then I kind of got into poetry and arts through that late, like in my middle school years. But when I was younger, I actually wanted to be a brain surgeon.
Wow.
And I still do have like an aspiration of like, when I'm in my elder years and I decide that I want to be a doctor, that hope maybe, I don't know. That's something I thought about before. So yeah, I just want to do all the things.
You can do it all. You don't have to box yourself in.
Right. But I truly do love my art. And so, yeah, I'm doing art forever, ever.
What about you, Michael?
from about 10, 10 was when it went crazy and the music came in and you were like, okay, this is it. And this is what I feel from that. But definitely very assertive I knew from 10 years old, I think I want to be a musical spirit and like perform in front of people. So yeah.
All right. Well, it's really great to be in space with you all today. People who've known what they wanted to do since they were young. I want to go ahead and jump right into the conversation. We're talking today about liberation within our artistry. We're talking about activism within our artistry. We're talking about freedom and also equity, advancing equity, and using our mediums to do that. And so my first question for you all is, what is liberation? I think it's really important that we have a shared understanding of what we're talking about here today, and also a varied perspective, whatever our varied perspectives are. And so I want to start with, what is liberation? What does it look like to you within your artistry? And anybody can jump in.
I would probably, I would enter this. I'll enter into the space first, if that's cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's an interesting word. I really kind of I connect it to abolition, in a sense of liberation. I connect it to releasing freedom within our thoughts, within the way we behave. I think it's rechanging language, it's recrafting spaces. I see all of that as liberation, us liberating ourselves from white spaces, from the written word, from white supremacist culture. Is all of that, and even out the way we behave and the way we think we behave, because we've been conditioned by this energy and European supremacist kind of energy within the arts. So when I say liberation, I feel it's us taking away all of that structure and liberating ourselves with a new freedom, with a new space, with a new understanding of our blackness within these spaces that we have been conditioned in. But now I think we are getting to a liberation. There is a liberation happening within black art, black culture, blackness that we've never seen before. It is in Ifa, it is the time in African spirituality, they say it's the time of Shango, which is really black empowerment. So this time that we see George Floyd and everything, it was meant to be, because in the spiritual world, it was said this was the time the Orishas told us that black power would come into the world again in a new way. So that's what I see liberation as.
Wow. I would say for me, just riffing off of Michael, like, I think that an artist's duty, or what artists do, is curate in alignment with themselves, with their humanity. I think that I had the cool opportunity to do a panel residency with Long Wharf for a month with Isaac, who's a puppeteer and like just awesome local muralist. Amazing. And so we had this really intense conversation about like how we were tired of having conversations about like, oh, what is the future like, what is all these different things, but we're like, okay, but what's happening now, what's relevant, and like what is really being an artist, and why is it so threatening to the system? Why is it, what does that look like? So when we talk about liberation, I think about liberation, I think about, okay, first let's start off with what truly artists are, and why do oppressive systems censor artists? Well, they censor artists because artists have this crazy cool ability to censor their art and humanity and ignite that in everybody. When we have a system that does not censor humanity, that does not censor people's health, wellness, all these different things, of course, a dictator or any type of like system is going to be like, we need you to shut up because you're getting people lit, you're getting people excited, you're getting people to think that their humanity matters, that their life matters. And I think that is the key thing right now, is that we're at a tug of war with humanity. And I think that our liberation is connecting to that, and artists are going to be the liberators for that. So yeah.
I'll just jump in and build off of some of the awesome things that have already been said. I guess when I think of liberation, at least in my own work, I think about like getting past decolonization to creative sovereignty, to like actually being in a space where like we can tell stories in our own languages without like any of the limitations that have been put on us by these colonial systems. And like within this space, like how can we actually fully be operating as like within Native nations as like fully embracing our sovereignty, as fully like being able to make all of the terms on our own. Because I feel like we're so far from that. I feel like, like when we're talking about like growing up as a kid, right? I always think about like as a kid, the only representations of Native people I saw on stage were always red face. And like now we're getting to the point where there is some Native representation in the theater on mainstream stages, but it's still always under the terms of predominantly white institutions. It's, that's not to say there aren't Native organizations that, are also making their own theater, but like when it comes to like what's being seen in mass, it's going to be a long time before we can get to actually like creating work in that way on our terms and being allowed to do that. And in many ways, it mirrors a lot of the like the inhibitions being put on our nations. Like they're intertwined. Like the ways they're trying to limit the sovereignty of Native people is the same ways they're trying to limit the art of Native people, because like of what Salwa was talking about, like that fear of like what will then be transformed and what will then be possible, and all of the ideas that will be opened up and awakened that will like reveal all of the flaws of the white supremacist systems that we're under, and the fact that they're not helping anyone. I mean, yes, they're helping white people stay in power, but they're not actually benefiting the planet or the species in the long run, even for them. So it's like, once all of that is gone, what are we actually capable of imagining is what I think about.
What about you, Robert?
Yeah, so many great thoughts have been already dropped. I'm like, wow, we're going to start out on that tip. All right. I mean, we're dropping gems already. But here's what I'll say to that is that to support everything that everybody so beautifully stated, when I think of liberation, I think I take it just a step forward to think about also the ownership, because liberation can't be had without ownership. And so when we talk about liberation, if we're not talking about ownership and recalibration of the mind and how you own who you are on a daily basis, then we can't really have a real conversation, because liberation is an idea. It's a thought process. It's an everyday movement. When you get up every day, you have the opportunity to liberate yourself. How are you going to change your sector of people? How are you going to impact culture? How are you going to shift the narrative, whether you're Native American, Hispanic, African American, African, if you're Asian? How are you going to infiltrate what whatever system that you are trying to change as an artist, you have that opinion and that opportunity every day. So the first thing when I talk about liberation is ownership. I own who I am every day, and you have to begin to own who you are every day so that you can walk in liberation. In the spiritual realm, in the African American culture and spiritual realm, we have a verse that we stick to in the Black church that says, "Who the sun sets free is
free indeed."
Right? Okay, but that idea, because that's religious, but the truth of that, the spirituality piece of that, or the everyday living piece of that, is who makes the decision every day to be free shall be free. So you have to get up every day, and if you're living by the expectations of, these typical systems that have been set up to say you don't fit in the market, we don't have an artist like you out there, your hair's too thick, you're too thick, your nose is too long, your skin is not white enough. If you live in these boxes continually of trying to check off somebody else's ideal and mindset, then you can never walk in liberation. So liberation is a mindset. Liberation is a decision. And then liberation is also awareness of you understanding every environment that you walk in, you are bringing liberation to.
Ooh, you better go.
Listen, y'all can drop your mics because, wow. This is question 1, y'all. Okay. So I have so much to follow up with that. I guess I'm wondering, as we're talking about liberation and we're talking about what it is of ownership and accountability, and we're talking about what it looks like to walk as a liberated person in spaces that don't often welcome us, right? Who are not often prepared for us. We're ready. We're progressive. These spaces are not. And so what I'm wondering is, what do y'all do to take care of your souls? And what boundaries do you set for yourself? What does a boundary look like? Are there boundaries while you're doing this work? So what does that look like to you, and how does that show up?
I'll jump in. Go ahead, Robert.
No, go ahead. I'm laughing because I'm like, artists, boundaries, what?
What? I know.
I feel like for mine lately, just because it was really short, was the only reason I thought of it, is I don't go in alone anymore. Like, if I know I'm going into a space where something could be compromised, like, I won't go in alone. Like, I will always have someone else with me. Like, whether that means that, like, like, for example, at Red Eagle Soaring, it's already a Native organization, but we have a co-artistic director model in order to help further decolonize that space. Like, if I'm going in and working on a show, I'm not going to go in and work on a show without a bunch of other Native artists with me, because, like, I don't want to, like, I have no interest in going into those spaces anymore alone. Like, I tried that as a young person, and, like, I had those experiences and I learned. And, like, so for me now at this point, I'm like, you're not getting me to go in alone. It's not happening.
Anybody else? Boundaries, protecting yourself, your own energy. What is that?
I would say, for me, that's like, I'm coming into a new, and it's so interesting that we're saying like talking about this on this particular platform, because I think that New Haven has so much work to do. And especially like recently being like the founder and start of Black Haven, having a collective of young arts administrators who are eager to do this work, artists who are eager to be curators, and from Black artists from across the entire state. And it's been interesting to have not only to know my boundaries for myself, but when engaging with an arts organization in New Haven or in Connecticut, that 9 times out of 10, that organization centers whiteness and centers capitalism and how artistic, how arts exists, like particularly this platform. 9 times out of 10, their policies like prioritize organizations that center whiteness, or have created policies that center whiteness that Black people were not in the room for. So we have like a serious need to looking into. And so I had to start to create this understanding that when I step into a room, or when I'm looking at, collaborating with organizations, that I'm not only subjecting myself to whatever that space or system is working through, I'm also subjecting a whole bunch of really amazing, talented Black creators, curators, and artists to those experiences. And I'm like, maybe I need to, prepare them, or, start to, get these access to these trainings. So it's been an interesting time for me because I think I'm starting to come into that. I'm starting to come into that understanding that, the violence that happens in these white centered spaces around in arts, and particularly in New Haven that I've experienced, and then across Connecticut, wilding. But we got work to do. But you know what? We here and we in it. We doing the work because it's so essential and it's so important. That's a part of that liberation piece. Because I'm sure that New Haven, I'm sure that Connecticut, even though we're in a place of, coming into this Black Lives Matter understanding, a lot of funding has been, starting to shift. And of course, with the cultural equity plan that Adriane been killing, we're getting there. And I think what really feeds me is that what Robert was saying about knowing yourself and knowing your worth. Because once you know that, you ain't gonna take it no more. You're gonna be like, where the check? Okay, where at? Stop playing with me. No, I do not want to sacrifice over me. Run me that money. You can give me that. You know what I'm saying? Like, let Black creatives lead. Let Black creatives lead without limits. Let Black creatives lead, period. And you know what I'm saying? Keep it pushing.
Well, how do you prevent, and this is for all of you, you can answer the first question and or this, right? How do you prevent it from being where you are being tokenized? How do you stop? That's a thing. And I'm sure many of you, all of you probably have experienced that, especially now with the demand on wanting more representation, wanting more Black, Indigenous representation, which is great, right? But with it not coming always from the best place, right? It kind of being like, I'm going to check the box, like with some organizations, right? So how are you preventing and pushing back against tokenism?
Well, I think, the first thing is just simple. Know your value. Know your value. I mean, we have to, when we start talking about the liberation or the acceptance of marginalized groups in these open spaces or mainstream spaces, when you come to the table, one of the biggest things that I talk about is knowing what you're bringing to the table. So, and that also means knowing your craft and knowing your skill. And I think it's a fine balance in line, because a lot of times we want to be accepted as marginalized groups in these mainstream spaces, but then you come to the space and let's just be honest, you may be subpar. Your performance is not all the way there. You're not handling your business correct. Your booking agent is not handling you correctly. You're late. You're not showing up. You're not executing. So when we talk about, how to not be tokenized, or how to, because really the question is, how are you accepted and valued in these spaces, is show up and do the work. Show up and be prepared, and don't meet a stereotype that is already there before you get there. So I think that is the first thing. And know your business. Yes, you want to be an artist. Yes, you want to be creative, and all that is so important. But artistry without business is limited. Why? Because the masses are able to understand who you are, hear your dream. I mean, I was, and this is no commercial because he's on here, but I watched an Michael yesterday. Oh, he killed the stage here in Connecticut last night. And one thing that I admired when I was watching him is almost like when I think of the people like James Brown, or I think of the people like Aretha Franklin, or I think of the greats that were there. They were greats because they were business minded, because they were business influenced. So how do we not, I don't want to take this too left, but how do we not be tokenized? How do you know your value, know your craft, build and study the heck out of your craft? Don't be subpar, so that when you come to the table, it won't be a question because you're Black, Native American, Asian, a woman. It will be because you're talented and you deserve the thousands of dollars that you deserve for that moment.
Mm-hmm. Could I push back on that?
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Is this thing on? Be bold. And I think personally, I think being imperfect. I definitely experienced tokenization being in New Haven. Particularly, I think not only is it because of the various identities that I hold, but also because I grew up in New Haven my whole life. And the young people that would be in my position are either buried in jail or moved out of the city because there's no services, there's no opportunities. And so I feel like for me, and even saying that like gives me shivers because it's so disheartening. We're just getting our Q house, which is was the youth center back in the day. Was been like out of whatever for 20 years for the Black and brown community. We did not have a youth center. It was like a small little basement in the library. And so I think that for me, growing through this experience of leadership and arts administrative leadership. And I had the privilege of having an amazing mentor, Aaron Jefferson, who put me onto arts administration when I was 16, when there was absolutely nothing in this city close to what what they were putting me through. I failed a lot. I've disappointed people. I've came late. You know what I'm saying? I've done all those things, but I think that we fall into this trap as people of color, particularly Black folks, that we have to be literally the God sent, the whatever. Oh, you're coming here. You're gonna be and adhering to the perfectionism of what whiteness wants us to do. You have to be on it all the time. I don't care if George Floyd died this week and he looked like your uncle, brother, sister, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care if someone whatever happened, and because you know what I'm saying, like that stuff definitely affects us.
Yes.
You know, when things are happening in the world, injustices are happening in the world, when things are happening in Palestine, something that I felt heavily, that affects me. And so I think that going back to knowing who you are and centering humanity, I think that there is, yes, you can be the grind hard, be hard, get out here in these streets, knowing your talent, but also don't be afraid to ask for help. Also, don't be afraid to ask for resources and support, because a lot of Black people, a lot of Black creatives aren't getting the funding that they would get to help them get these trainings, because honey, I have not found an arts administrative little program, whatever, without it being a master's program. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, the artists of color, Black artists are learning through each other from the things that we've learned over time. And artists as well, you know, being an artist and arts programming be expensive and all this other things. So I think that not being afraid to reach out and ask for help and be mentored and be held, and be yourself and fail, because that's where you grow. That's where you become that grind hard. That's where you become that, you know, better version of yourself.
Yes. And Adriane, I'm sorry, just really quick to tap into what you just said, Salwa. The last piece to that I would just encourage, because we don't know who's watching this, is what spaces are you creating? Like, so you want to talk about being a token, but what have you yourself created a space for, you know, while you're trying to learn? Why are you not building for your friends and peers? Why are you not creating your own theater programs? Why are you not creating your own, you know, mechanisms to make it work? So what valuable spaces are you creating to add value to other people? I'm sorry, Madeline. I just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Madeline. Go ahead and jump in.
Now I'm trying to remember, but I got so caught up with what Robert was saying now that I'm like, what you were saying was making me think about, like, whenever someone, you know, is always like, oh, how do you stay grounded in this work? I'm always like, well, let me be clear. Like, I work for 2 Native-centered organizations, and then I go off, you know, and I do work in mainstream institutions, but then I come back to the Native-centered organizations. You know, I don't have to live in that other space. But I think the thing that I was thinking about that I just wanted to jump in with was, for me, something that was really helpful early on was, you know, I feel like a lot of times in artist training, they get you really focused on like witchcraft or being a kind of mechanism within like the art industry, but it's not really about which thing you want to do so much as it is like, what do you want to do? What do you want to transform? You know, like how you want to contribute to society.
Yes.
It's so much more fluid, you know, like whether I'm writing or directing or performing or helping somebody else out, like I can then have a mind to like, what are all the possible things I could be doing to help like move the world toward this? And you don't get cut off the same way, you know, as if it was like, if I was like, I want to be an actor and someone was like, no, well, then it would be like, stop. But if I was like, I want to transform the world through storytelling, you can come at that from so many different angles and figure out where that's resonating with you. Because to be honest, like at the beginning of my career, all of the significant theater people who knew who I was because they hated me because I told them they shouldn't be doing something like racist that they were doing, you know? And like, that was the theater world at that moment. But you get to a point where you're like, well, I'm not here to like make those people happy. I'm here, like, you know, if I can't go back to my tribe at the end of the day, that's what I care about, not whether or not these white artistic directors are gonna like approve of me within a hypothetical industry, because I'm not here. And that's what I wanted to just contribute in terms of this token idea, right? Is like, yeah, they're gonna try. They're gonna keep trying, because like as artists, we're world builders. And they don't see the world that we're trying to build. So they're going to keep trying to turn it into what they brought you in thinking you would do. But you just can't. And I think it helps if you know you're accountable to something larger or something else outside of the art itself.
Absolutely. And I think what I want to add, and I know we kind of moved off of it, I'm thinking about your comments, Robert. And what I'm thinking about is, while what you're saying may be true, right? is what is the root cause behind that, right? And usually it's lack of access to information, lack of knowing what professionalism even looks like, right? And so we really need to be working on how we dismantle those systems so that our people, right, our Black, Indigenous people have access, have resources in order to meet that standard. Because right now we're not competing, right? In certain industries, the doors are not open, but there is a reason behind it. It's rooted in the system. And until we attack that system, it will always be problematic. And so I just think that, I just wanted to state that. But I do want to move us forward to the next question, which is really aligned to what we're talking about. As y'all know, I mean, we're still kind of in it, COVID-19, we've gone through it for almost 2 years, right? It has totally changed our world. It's been an unprecedented time. If we look at COVID and where the bulk of it happened, which is in the hotspot communities, Black and brown communities, and then we put that with the other pandemic of social unrest and police brutality and the racial inequity that's happening in our world and in our streets. A lot of us are changed, and we're not going to ever be the same, right? And so my question for y'all is, how have you been transformed during this time? What has transformation looked like for you, and how has that translated into your work? Michael, if you want to.
That's a deep one. It's a deep one because life completely did change in a sense that you're an artist, you're a musician, and you out here gigging and stuff like that. But then as the world changes, pandemic and also the reckoning of George Floyd and his spirit in the world, it definitely changed in the sense that we use, there's a hustle that comes involved in realizing what the time is now and the time to really knock the doors open. And I say that in a sense that there are these relationships that you've had as an artist, and you go to performing arts centers, very white predominantly performing arts centers, and you do something. You talk about tokenism. We did a show, the group, 2 years ago called Harlem 100, very tokenism kind of show, I would say. In a sense, we had to kind of reflect music of the Harlem Renaissance, but in a way that a white promoter wanted it to be seen. So that was a very interesting situation. Now, as the world changed last year, we connected with a lot of these institutions through that show that we did, and we were able to actually take the power back and say, we want to create things that actually is of us. So a lot of the places where we played before we started connecting with them, we started, can we have a Zoom meeting? Can we speak to you? Why do you want to speak to? We want to come here and have more Black programming in your institutions. Two, we want to decolonize the music curriculum in a certain way. So a lot of conversations are happening like that. How do we create the space for musicians to not be in this Western European music space, or you have to believe in the written word and you have to be classically trained? Remove that. And thirdly, we were able to kind of go to some of these places and put artists at the forefront of anti-racism. So we went to Bard College this last year and did a whole week with them of artist-led anti-racism workshops. So life completely changed from you being Michael Mwenso, singer, musician, to now you're able to push your mind and spirit to actually allocate and interrogate these spaces which you have been before, and changing and reshaping in a certain way to actually make it better and create more equity. So that's what the year did.
What about you, Robert?
I've learned so many lessons about the pandemic. The pandemic is one I think that did not just teach about artistic capacity, but also mental capacity, physical capacity. I mean, evaluation of just relationships. But I think the greatest thing is really it's the conversation we're having, is understanding my value. Because when you're not able to be an artist or creative or someone who expresses for a living out and connect with the audience, it changes the dynamic of everything. And so when you're not able to sit in front of, 50 or 100 or 1,000 people and feel their energies, feel their stories, and then pour something back into them, a lot of times what it does is it puts you into this depressive mode, and you're depressed because you feel that you're not able to do what you're supposed to do and what you were put on earth for. So, I mean, I've gained so much respect for myself. And I think a lot of times we don't do that. We don't take the time to respect the gift that we are to be to others. And when your cup is empty, and you need it refilled, like sometimes you just have to take that time. So my biggest lesson has just been self-reflection and really understanding my own value, my own worth, and what I bring to the table. And then how much it takes. It takes a lot to stand up on that stage. It takes a lot to pour out into people night after night, or whatever you're doing, whether it's visual, artistic, or whatever it is, whatever artistic expression you have, it takes a lot. So understanding that value.
So
I guess I'll follow that. Yeah, I was just like thinking intensely for like the last what everybody was saying. I think for me, the pandemic, for me, I think I talked about this a little bit in the beginning about how, when I was very young, I sang, and I sang all the time. Even my mom be busting a little bit of notes. Not be busting notes. And so she'll be singing when she's cooking or doing like different things. And so singing for me is literally conversation with my spirit, conversation with the universe, conversation with God. And so there was a long time where I was writing songs and nobody just knew I could sing, and nobody knew that I had this like kind of artistic thing. And so I came into my poetry and all these different things. So I think that during the pandemic, what I realized is that, my space, my safe space, my place where I contemplate and think and I process is in my room with my new loop machine and my microphone. And I'm just having conversations with God. I'm having conversations with myself. I'm thinking about everything and anything. And, that for me was my coming into the pandemic, just realizing that art for me it's a part of me. It's an extension of me. It's not attached to a system. It's not attached to whatever. It's not attached to any of that. It's literally my water. It's literally my milk. It is all of that. And because of that, I know that inevitably that will be reflected when I do get to have the opportunity to be in that place. So I was actually in Los Angeles, living in Los Angeles when the pandemic happened. I was out here trying to live I was actually living my best life. And about to do all these awesome opportunities were coming around the corner. I was so lit. And so it was interesting for me because I was about to really get in deeper into the artist community and the artivism community in LA. And then I had to come and move back to Connecticut. I didn't even know I was going through forced relocation. And so I had to really figure out, bro, I'm back in Connecticut. I was ready to peace out. Okay, I was ready to be God. I was like, Connecticut don't love me. They got no love for me. But through that, I think the pandemic for me was a blessing even with all the struggles and the trials. I think it was a blessing. I got to spend Ramadan with my family. I got to see my baby niece grow up every single day from, zero first couple hours to 1 year old. And now she's like walking around like, all this stuff. And so I hope I'm like connecting it all together.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I was definitely depressed. I'm not gonna lie. As an artist, I was depressed. I was like, oh my God, I was in LA. Now I'm in Connecticut. Now what I do? And once I decided, I thought to myself, dang, I cannot keep comparing myself to who I was before the pandemic. I need to start being present with where I'm at right now and move forward. And once I recognized that I kept comparing myself and my mental health and my state to who I was before entire world shut down, and I just said, you know what? It's okay not to be okay. That's when I started Black Haven. The first, short film festival that happened in New Haven ever, like Black Short Film Festival, which went amazing. And so when you make those decisions and you start to realize, it's okay for me not to be perfect, it's okay for me not to be okay, I'm going to make the most of what's going on now, those opportunities will present itself. And I think the greatest thing about right now, I think that people don't realize how awesome for artists the pandemic was once we got a hold of it. This virtual situation was all over the place. Okay, I was on people's lives from LA, I was on people's lives from here, there,
right.
Touch a different audience. So you just gotta, like artists do, take advantage of the situation. And also, as a Black creative, I say this all the time: there is no better time for you to do whatever you want right now, because everybody want to tokenize you and everybody want to give you that money. So you can, you know what I'm saying? Take that money, get some grants, call up your homies, whatever, ask for help, do what you need to do. Because if there's any time, it's now. It's now.
I just want to say we are so glad you're in Connecticut, though, Salwa. I know you wanted to be in LA, but we are just so glad that you are here with us and that we have you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here though. I don't get it mistaken. I'm really blessed. It's been amazing. It's really been amazing. I'm meant to be here. So I'm really glad to be here.
Madeline, what about you?
Oh gosh. I feel like so many things, so many of the things that have been said in so many different ways. Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning, right, there was that phase where I was like, because I'm theater is like, is like specifically the thing that I tend to make, or at least did before the pandemic, right? That's sort of the weird thing about the situation. So at the very beginning, I was like, oh my God, like, what does it mean if this medium can no longer exist? And actually, ultimately, I think it was really interesting to then. It wasn't very long before I feel like we hit this point, at least with native theater. I know theater directors who actually haven't made anything the entire pandemic, which I find very strange. Because like we hit a point pretty early on where suddenly we realized in terms of accessibility and stories being able to reach people, we were in a really unique moment. Like a reading, like of a play that maybe like in a New York theater might have got like 20 native people to show up. Suddenly we have 2,000, It was just like there was this really unique thing that started happening. And we were like, oh, actually, the connective threads that are possible right now
Yes.
are immense. And it forced me, and I think a lot of people I know, to do things that like maybe we weren't good at, like maybe we're gonna do an audio or a film project or a ton of things that look terrible on Zoom just to get the story across or just to develop something. And so I think it was really, really interesting in that way to push everyone out of their comfort zone. Also because like there was like a ton of people wanting to tokenize Native people right during this period of time. So suddenly there was more funding for Native projects. And I think part of that was also because it wasn't as much funding as they would have needed if they were actually bringing everyone together. But there was just so much being made that it created this kind of exciting synergy. And I think it was also, we're all in this very real moment, right? Where, like, I feel like the fear of like elders passing away and like things like that is like super significant. And so like our relationship to culture bearers and language keepers and things like that is like even more heightened, than it would normally be. And so I think around that, a lot of these stories just really, really, really like they kept evolving, and there's suddenly a support for them that there hasn't been before. And I know that like I'm not in TV, but I know that everyone I know who writes in TV suddenly like lots of people want pilots to do stories in a way that they never did before. And like there was finally a Native sitcom, which is like crazy and amazing. Like the fact that Rutherford Falls existed and existed, hopefully we'll get another season, offers so much potential for like what is created in the future in terms of like Native joy, in terms of recognizing that up until now it was like we were only allowed to create work around trauma, and like there couldn't be joy. Like what does it mean now that we can create joy? And so I think it's not a very succinct answer to anything about the pandemic, but I think that like a lot of people are saying, it created a space of thinking about everything differently, thinking about the fact that like, yeah, I don't really want to go back to being on a plane like 3 times a week when this is over. Like I actually really enjoyed sleeping in my bed and what that meant in terms of like my own mental health and sanity, but still being able to reach other people and like being able to be on the traditional lands of my people, but also being able to work with other Native artists who are at home on their reservations at the same time. There's so many weird and unique things that happened during this time that I don't think I'll ever really know how to put words to, but yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there for then. I think it opened something up. I think the fact that everything changed, right? It opened up things that we would have never been able to think about otherwise.
Can I follow up behind you just to like, I feel like what you were saying about like we're tokenized now, all this funding all of a sudden got opened up. Yo, that is so real. I think that if I could elaborate on what happened was Black Lives Matter happened. A lot of these movements came to the forefront, and we didn't have to explain to white people and people in power where the money at. You know what I'm saying? Like we didn't have to explain anymore because you could turn on every single screen and see this dude call for his mom while this dude had his knee on his neck. You know what I'm saying? Knee on his neck. And there's no conversation to be had. I remember a couple of years ago when we were having these conversations, with schools, when they said the N-word, which we're dealing with now in New Haven, when where all these different, situations are happening and people are like, oh, well, it's not that serious. Oh, well, we got to keep moving forward. We're moving forward. We're getting into a new age. And then we realize, oh, shoot, like the economic gap is ridiculous. Like, the oppression, the gun violence, all this stuff, all these things are still happening and they're still real. And everybody, no matter what race, no matter what age, you see the little girl, she was talking about some no chat fast, no peace. You know what I'm saying? everybody knew. And so I think that now we're in a time and an age, and I hope we keep on it, because I know it's trendy and it's cute right now, but I hope that we do continue this course of centering Black and brown voices, indigenous voices, getting that funding, because oppression is rooted in all the different aspects that it is, but we don't want to talk about running me my money. Like we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about making grants less than 6 or 7 pages, giving it a Google sheet. You know what I'm saying? Giving it a little, because it's just too much. Letting these having these organizations who gatekeep this funding, to give it to Black and brown organizations without conditions. Without the what's your outcome number 1, 2, 3, 4? What percentage of what place do you impact what neighbor? I don't know. What I do know is that you couldn't do what I do at the end of the day. And I think that's what my pet peeve, I'll go into it. But my pet peeve is definitely seeing organizations or institutions that have abundant behind resources steal from Black and brown ideas from Black and brown folks. Most of their talent is Black and brown, disrespect them, and then not do it as amazing as I've seen places like the Photo Booth in Hartford, Elm City Lit Fest. You know what I'm saying? The list goes on, There's so many Black and brown led collectives doing delicious programming, powerful programming, liberating programming, and just the money just won't, just not letting it go. Yeah. So I just hope that we get to a place where, yes, Black and brown folks are taking advantage of the, of the time, and that there is this push of just like radical redistribution of wealth, period.
I just want to throw something in on that, which is that I also think that in this unique moment, there was also a lot of, I don't know what it was like in other fields, but in theater, there was a lot of alliances being formed to be able to call that out, right? In a way that wasn't happening before. Because of this moment, we're suddenly like, no one was working for these institutions. So I think all those fears that people had about like, oh, if I say something, I'll lose my job. Like nobody was being paid by theaters, except for the people at the very top. And so suddenly everyone started speaking out and forming alliances and calling things to action because of this moment. And so I hope that that continues and it doesn't just like get real quiet again, right? Once everyone's back at work.
Well, okay. So I had another question, but I'm going to stay on this theme for a little while, because we are talking about shaping the future, right? How artists shape the future. So what do you feel are some suggestions? And you're already kind of throwing it out there. You're talking about the problem of the inequity within funding. We're talking about the lack of representation. So what do we need to do in order to be more equitable within the arts ecosystem? What does that look like? What are just some few things you can list off that people can do immediately, and whether you're an artist or whether you're an arts organization, in order to be more equitable and to advance racial justice and racial equity?
Dang, where's that consultant fee? Because well, just a little intro tip, I'm saying? I won't go say too much, because if you would like to know more, you can follow me at Salwa Sweet Melodies. We could talk about my consultant fee. We could get more deep into it. But I think the biggest thing, the juiciest thing when I think about institutions, because I think that, yes, community funding, like building funding from the community, getting those donations are definitely powerful. And we just got mad money from the American Rescue Bill. We just got mad money from the state on arts funding. Those fundings are not prioritizing, most likely won't, and will go to like the same kind of, big places and institutions. And so if you're an institution, arts institution in Connecticut, New Haven, you know that you could get them millies, you can get them 100,000, you could get them whatever thousands, and you can get that radically distribute it, and look into your policy. Change your policy. Your policy does not consider organizations and Black collectives that are being born in the last 5 years. When we create these policies, we're thinking about, oh, well, we're going to partner with this place that's been around for 120 something years. Well, 120 something years ago, okay, would be a different situation for me. So I feel like we're in a time now where you see a lot of radical, dope arts, things birthing. But with that, and we need fiduciaries and all these different things to try to apply to these grants. We need to start looking into changing the policy. And I'm telling you, they love to talk about, they love to talk about, well, that's not a part of our policy. That's not really how we do. Well, switch it up then. Switch it up. Okay, it's 2021.
But let me ask you something. So let me, Michael, I want to bring you back into this conversation. What about artist accountability? What does that look like? You know, are artists accountable too? And if so, what does it look like? Especially because artists have a certain level of influence, right? And so what you do with that influence, do you feel like there's an accountability level the more influence you have within the arts ecosystem? Or do you feel like, no, I'm just doing my art form, I just want to feel free and liberated, there is no accountability? Curious your thoughts on that, Michael.
Not if you come from a spiritual place of art and you understand that it is something ancestral to be shared and to be given and to build community and to pass on. And if you understand those spiritual requirements of what art is, no, you have accountability. You have ancestral accountability to people that were before you. You have accountability to the people in your time. You have accountability to your art forms. So yes, you have to deal with an accountability. The word maybe not accountability, just your own. It is accountability. You could say that. I like that. It is. There's a spiritual accountability that comes with being an artist, that comes from the people before you, the people in your time, and the people that you're trying to help that come after you. So yes, you do have to have that. And as Black people, it's important because of just how much we built through community and through art. So we have a deeper requirement to deal with accountability because also we've lost so much ownership and power. So we have to deal with accountability even deeper now because it's more important for us to actually gain the power and create the spaces for us to flourish better. Yeah.
Robert?
I was going to add to that, Mike. Those are good thoughts, bro. You know what's important to me, and mentorship is extremely important to me. And you know, I think the first thing, yes, accountability. You know, when you're talking about accountability, every day I get up as a Black man, as a young Black man, as a successful young Black man, man who is an entrepreneur and an artist. It is setting an example. And so I have to be accountable so that I can set the example because there is another Robert, there's another Michael, there's Salwa, there are people who are coming behind me. And if I don't set up a space after I tap into the knowledge, and then I have failed. And you have to use that word because it has to be bigger than you. And if it's not bigger than you every day, then, you know, it's no meaning for us to be here. But I have this saying that I give all my mentees, and that's why I shift the culture, particularly for Black young creatives that I mentor. And I'm going to a lot of corporate spaces, and I work for brands like Coca-Cola and Puma, and I go into a lot of spaces where my marketing firm, I'm the only Black. This is before the pandemic. I was at the largest performing rights organization in the world, BMI. I was the youngest and the only young Black executive that was there at my age in that space in that time. And the biggest thing I tell my mentees is you have to feed the dream until the dream feeds you. And so many times when we say that, we think, oh, I had to have the money to fuel the dream. But the truth is that when you eat, it's nutrients. So what are you putting around your plate? It has to be knowledge. It has to be, your artistry can no longer, especially post-pandemic in this social impact space that we're living in, your artistry cannot just be about making a hit. Now it has to be about, how do I make music that feeds my soul, but then connects to a marginalized community? Then that is also commercial, because you're not going to get rid of commercialism. That is also somewhat commercial, that connects to a particular demographic of people that can sell, that can buy in. So all these ideas are things that have to start with you. And so accountability is great. And I would just add to that next piece to just say mentorship. If we're not mentoring as artists to come up behind us, we'll lack. In the 60s and 70s, there was no, why do we have Stevie Wonder, James Ingram, Aretha Franklin, Patti LaBelle? Like, why do we have all these stars? And now it's a competition to say who fits in what market space. It was no competition. Why? Because each one taught one. They set up a space to say, girl, I'm going to take the baton here, you take it further. Bro, I'm going to leave the baton here, you take it further. So mentorship in our artistry is extremely important.
Madeline, what about you?
Yeah, so for me, I think a lot about in every story I tell, right? Like as a theater maker, like how are the stories that we choose to pass down shaping our collective possible future? And so I say that because in the theater industry, there are some old-fashioned, in addition to white supremacist sort of like principles operating, right? So people tend to have this thinking pattern of like, we can just take this story and do it again and not think about what it means. And like, how on earth could you tell a story and not think about how that story is accountable to the people who are receiving it? Like, like half of the story is being made up by everything that the audience is carrying into that space. So why are you not accountable to that? So when I think about accountability, I usually am thinking a lot about in what stories I tell and how I choose to tell them. How am I both honoring the ancestors and everything they've brought up to this point, but how am I also thinking about like the next generations that come and how they might pick up this moment and go from there. So I feel like for me, my accountability is always thinking about like where the story sits at this moment in time and what it's like carrying forward, and then also like what it's enabling to occur next. Because I think that for me, the most frustrating thing in like my particular area of the arts industry is this idea that stories are ever or could ever possibly be neutral. That they could just like, there could just be this world where like policy isn't actually impacting everything else. Like any story isn't actually impacting everything else. And so, yeah, so when I think about accountability, I'm always thinking about like my accountability to like anything that I'm making and where it sits in relationship to not only the fact that like if I am making something that in any way represents Mohegan culture, it's probably the first time that anyone in the audience has encountered that, right? So like there's like a weird diplomatic responsibility where even if like in the case of my solo show, it's literally my personal journey. But good luck convincing everyone in the audience that it doesn't represent all Mohegan people, let alone like all Native people in some way. And so I'm constantly trying to be like, okay, how do I get out of all of these possible things to create a space where as we go forward, other people won't be limited to those confines that are put upon us.
Woo. I love that. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I love that, man. I love that because, and I'm sorry, Adriane, I don't want to take, but
you're fine. Go ahead. It's a roundtable conversation.
But the power in what you're saying is that it also requires you to do some research and evaluation of your life every day. And so many times I feel like as artists, we become lazy because we are quick satisfaction. What gets a knee-jerk reaction? What causes people to love us in the moment? But the truth is, as an artist, your responsibility is not the quick satisfaction of what somebody loves in the moment. It's the imprint and the impact that you leave on somebody's life to after they leave that theater, after they leave that concert, after, they turn off their Spotify. What have you said? What have you done to make the difference? And that's the differentiator between an artist and a regular person. What does a regular person do that an artist, what is the superhero power of an artist is the ability to leave an imprint and a power to leave an imprint that goes beyond just the moment. It lives for a lifetime. It lives for a legacy. It lives for a destiny for a person. That is another level of thinking that the pandemic has required us to do. But I hope who's ever listening and that is an artist, and artistry does not just take the form of you speaking or creating on paper. Artistry is a decision that you make every day when you wake up. I hope that the artists that are listening understand that you have to evaluate more every day about the moment that you live in and not just use it for appropriation.
So, do you have any thoughts?
Listen, everything that was supposed to be said, was said. I feel like I definitely was connecting to like being an artist and what accountability looks like. And I think that I definitely felt connected to the mentoring thing. I find myself, talking to a lot of young Black creatives who are just like, yo, so how do I do this? Like, how do I do this kind of thing? How do I come up with this idea? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so I think I definitely connect to that, to the idea. And particularly I'm super, super passionate about doing that with young people, as early as possible, in their middle school and teenage ages, like how I got the opportunity to, so that they can, when they're coming into, I don't have a college degree. A lot of people don't know that, but I have some college experience, but because I've been doing this for so long, because this is my bread and butter, because this is what I think about, this is what I breathe about, this is what I read about, you know what I'm saying? I know my work. I know my craft. And so I think that trumps everything all the time. And now I have the opportunity, inshallah, to be able to look at college as the cherry on top of the cake of what I'm doing. So I think that definitely as artists, we have a responsibility to always reaching back and pulling up our folks, creating spaces where we get to tell our stories truly and authentically, like Sis was saying. And yeah, I think, and also to be in collective spaces. I think a good friend of mine was talking about Slate. He's like, how do we bring, when the pandemic was happening before the pandemic, we had the green room. That's where we all, whenever we was at a show or we was doing something, we had the green room to link up. Everybody was talking, everybody want to get in the green room. How do we bring that community or that community sense and that feeling back? And I think that we need to start, uprooting our green rooms into the world and into the verse. So that we're just creating stronger community. I think artists definitely need to be more and more accountable with each other so that we aren't getting taken advantage of. So that when you go to a certain bar and they're saying, oh, we're going to pay you $50 to do an hour, 2-hour performance, you're like, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. You need to pay people more. And actually, on me, all my homies, we not performing until you run it up. So I think that I definitely have been really interested, particularly with Black Haven, which is a lot of the spirit of that, is what does it look like for creatives to connect, to link up, and hold each other accountable, thus holding everybody else accountable who wants to engage with our work.
Well, I think that you all are doing amazing work and are just amazing and instrumental examples on what the future, actually what it is now and what the future will continue to develop into being when it comes to different forms of arts, because you all represent different disciplines. I wanted to leave some time for this last question before we wrap up, and it's about legacy. Essentially, you all are building legacies. Robert, you've mentioned the word legacy a few times, right? And as you're talking, I'm hearing and seeing and visualizing your legacies, all of our legacies. What legacy do you want to leave behind? When it's all said and done, what does it look like? Anybody?
Yeah, that's
it's a big one. I know.
Did you want to go? Go ahead.
I don't think I know what it looks like. I just was thinking about, I feel very lucky right now in that I am an artist who makes a lot of individual art, but I also work for 2 programs that specifically focus on Native youth in the theater. And so it's hard to imagine, this idea of legacy in terms of do I think that something that I make will impact blah, blah, blah. But I feel like I can much more imagine the more spaces we create, in these organizations for Native youth to flourish and be able to make their own art. Or maybe if they see something I made and then they think, how do I build on that? That's actually the thing I think I'm most excited about right now. And I think about it a lot with some of these organizations, because it's each moment we create an opportunity for somebody to say, oh, I can find my voice instead of having to fit into this other model. I can make youth theater as a 10-year-old with other Native artists instead of having to do Shakespeare. I can I can bring my full self to the work from the beginning instead of spending all this time having to fit into these other systems. But yes, within my theater trajectory, right? I still had to go through all the mainstream training and everything like that. But what if it looks different? That's what I'm really interested in is how can I leave behind a world in which those artists are actually able to come up in their own creative sovereignty instead of having to be colonized first.
Ooh, I love that. Madeline, you know what? I just need you in my ear every morning. I just love everything that you say. But I will ask everybody to do this really quickly. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in one more time. And breathe out. That is legacy. To me, that is legacy. Legacy is not a thought. I think so many times people think about legacy, what happened 20, 30 years from now. But legacy is everything that I moved, I lived, and I have my being in. And because I make a decision in that moment, because every breath that I take is a part of who I am, it's going to set up some chain reaction. And it might not be directly right now, but it will be for someone in the future. Because for every action, there's an equal reaction. And so everything that I do, when I get up and I walk away from here, it's going to cause something else to happen. So I think sometimes we miss the mark when we try to build up these huge systems to reach a mark, instead of just living in the moment and being who we were called to be. So that is legacy to me. Legacy is right now.
Yo, that's crazy. I definitely agree with that. I think that question really hit me because I love New Haven. And I've seen the beauty of it and the wealth of it and the just amazing artists, all of it, all of culture, all these different things. And so I truly in my heart want the best for New Haven. I want the best for Black and brown people across of Connecticut, and across the world, period. But I think that for me, legacy looks like and feels like, yo, just being like Robert was saying, being true and honest to what my call and purpose is. And I definitely feel called to, liberation through arts, empowerment through the arts, like that. Yo, we be underestimated, cuz and what all that looks like, not just in terms of, oh, make people feel good. I'm talking about, what I'm saying, artist housing. I'm talking about, which I have passion projects about. I'm talking about, all these different, being creative and utilizing our creative mind to transform communities, transform architecture and community architects. All these different things, and seeing where that goes. I just love an artist world, the idea of a world where, a city and where there's abundant murals and the streets are colored, like, wow, everything I gotta be brown and concrete. You know what I'm saying? I just want that to be the case. I want things to be bright and beautiful, as we meant are and are able to do, because we have that beautiful will in this cool world.
Michael, you take us out.
It's a very deep one, legacy. I mean, I feel that it's something that we as artists carry in a certain spiritual way. I think as Black people we carry. I think it is something that is also selfless, that that something comes after you, that it is not about you. To be honest, it's about building something that also is able to, again, the word impact has been chosen, but to also, I think, guide people to more love, in a sense that whatever is the function and medium of your art, that there is some love grounding within it. You've left people with feeling loved, like if your art has touched people to also love themselves, and has pushed them to actually create a picture of legacy, so that they want to share what you shared with them. So to have it, that the fellowship it has an abounding grace to it, so that what you shared with me, I want to share it with somebody. Not even that, legacy can be, yeah, I'm carrying this thing that the ancestors gave me, but I've never shared it before. That actually, it teaches people to actually share. That's the thing. So that's what I feel.
All right. I think on that note, there's not much else to say. I hope that everybody who was watching took notes and got all the gems that were dropped today. This was amazing. And I just want to thank y'all for your being transparent and your energy and your realness, and just honestly being able to offer yourself and the resources that's taken you time to build, right? We're very grateful for you today.
We're grateful for you too, Adriane, for creating this space.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Adriane. Hi, y'all. My name's Elizabeth. I work curating the ideas part of the festival, and it's a gift to get to spend time with each and every one of you, Adriane, Salwa, Madeline, Robert, Michael, and Nick and Katie, our fabulous ASL interpreters. It is really wonderful to be with you and to be creating space together. And I just am really sitting with, thinking about liberation, thinking about decolonization, thinking about transformation, and the ways that we are shaping with our artistry and our being, right? And really, Michael, the way you closed us out about how do we move towards love? Like, what is that? What does that look like? And make that, like, what you share. I'm thinking so much about, like, what you shared with me, I want to share. And how do we make that sharing? And we've been talking about that a lot. And the whole idea series is about reimagining or imagining futures and structures within and beyond what we've had, and like imagining in the company of very ancient, beautiful ideas too. So we're still going throughout the rest of this week. We have lots of events. You can find all of them at artidea.org. We also, for those of you watching, you're a really important part of this. You're so amazing. The comments today have been awesome. Yes, Salwa. Yeah, it's y'all, So this festival this year is 95% free. Y'all are an important part of it. We want to know what you think. If you go to artidea.org/survey, you can tell us everything you think. You can be like, yes, this, no, not that. I love this. I had this idea. We want all of it. And I hope to see you all either on the green, listening to some music, dancing. Both Salwa, Madeline, and Michael have all been on the green, or will be on the green. And I know Robert and Adriane have both been in audiences, so let's continue to party together.
I'm coming back to get on the green. I want to be on the green.
Yes. All right, y'all. Well, we will see you soon, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Picture me growing freely, no ceiling, no roof. Going deep with no stones to entangle.